To the basic question, how does it feel to have your podcast turned into a TV show?
You can probably answer that for me. Everybody has that little pet project or that dream, and this is surreal. It really is. And I'm just soaking in it. I'm so grateful for every moment. It's so fun.
Is there anything that you were particularly excited to finally see put into visuals?
I mean, Robert the doll. I mean, we have photos of the doll in the museum and stuff, but yeah, seeing him sitting at a dining room table having a meal with the family is just the creepiest. So that was pretty fun. Also, all of it, right? You know, it's so fun to see it come to life.
So what made you pick podcasting for this instead of like writing books in New York?
Well, it was an accident. I mean, I didn't try to do this. I had been self-publishing novels that were supernatural thrillers, and what I love to do, living in New England and bumping up against this great, rich folklore that we have in New England, I love to research true bizarre events that happen in the area and kind of weave them into these novels. And I'd find a dozen, and I would use one or two in the story to give it some more depth. And so I'd have all these pieces left over that I just didn't know what to do with. So I decided, well, if I want to sell more self-published novels, because it's all marketing, right? You got to get your word out, whatever. And I think what everybody's doing online these days is, hey, if you give me your email address, I'll give you this thing for free. And I thought, well, I could write up about 5 of these stories. I could write little essays about them and tell people these cool historical tales. And I wrote 4 of the 5. Looked at the word count on it. I was at 10 or 15,000 words, and realized that I was going to ask people to read them on the screen of their phone, you know, pinching and zooming on a PDF. And at that point, I thought, this is pointless. There's no value to this at all. So I dragged it to my trash can, and I was about to let go of it when I realized I could record this as an audiobook. Like I could do each of these as a little story. Grab my mic, I recorded one, I sent it to a friend. He said, no, don't do it. This is a podcast. And I fought him a little bit on it, but in the end I said, okay. And I put it out as that.
That's great.
Yeah.
I podcast myself. I do a Walking Dead. I take the comic books and turn them into audio dramas.
Oh, nice.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so it was just, when I saw it, I came across it and I was like, this is really interesting. And they're short enough that you can consume a lot of them at one time.
Yeah.
It was just really interesting that you did it bi-weekly, because there were a lot of research.
It takes a long time to make them,
yeah.
Sure.
Right.
And they're 25, 30 minutes long, because that's like my sweet spot for a podcast. Right. I don't like it much longer than that, so this works well.
Yeah.
What are your favorite stories that you've told in the podcast? Like, if you had to pick 1 or 2 that were your absolute favorite.
Well, I can't boil it down to an episode or 2, but what's happening as I've done 70 of these is some of the stories are beginning to be fleshed out over the years as I research more. So the story of Mercy Brown in Exeter, Rhode Island, being exhumed and having her heart cut out. You know, the first time I wrote the story and I released it, I thought, why did they, like, that's a really bizarre thing to do. You know, and I know that it had happened in other places around New England too. Why were they doing it? And then finding out later on that it's been done in Europe as well, I thought, well, okay, so it's not just an American thing, it wasn't a colonial thing, it was actually happening in Eastern Europe. Watching the pieces come together in the process of doing They Made a Tonic for the TV show, we actually dug deep enough to really find a lot of those answers that come through in the episode that have to do with a German physician in the 1700s who had some really weird ideas about where the soul lives and how if people die through suicide or illness, their hearts become like this prison for their soul, and we put them in the ground, and the soul is still there, so it needs to feed, and so they believe that this life force just fed on the life force of other people, and that explained the illnesses in town. So, of course, if you wanted to free the soul from the heart, you had to cut it out and burn it. And what happened was those German physicians learned this stuff. They came over with German mercenaries in the American Revolution, and then when the Revolutionary War was over, the German physicians stayed and wandered around New England helping villages with medical issues and kind of passed this folklore on to them. And then all of a sudden you've got people digging up their dead sisters and cutting out their hearts and burning them. So That's the stuff that I love. I love when the story gets deeper and it gets bigger, and I'm starting to put pieces together. So
Gotta love New England.
I gotta love it. That's right.
Did any
Those
of
Germans.
Did any of these stories give you nightmares when you were researching it? Some of them. I mean, that werewolf one, the beast within us. Oh my God.
I don't get a lot of. My nightmares are about production. Probably what you've got. Can I meet this deadline? Right. So those are my nightmares. The stuff that bothers me the most aren't the creature spooky things. It's the stories of what people have done.
Yeah.
That we're messed up. I mean, like, and we're not better now, you know. And I talk about that in Monday's episode that just came out. That we're really good at treating people badly when we are filled with hate. And that's just a universal truth about humanity. That's not a political statement. That's not a right or a left thing. That's not a Republican or Democrat. When we're hateful, we can do some nasty things. And you would think that by now we'd figure it out. That's the stuff that creeps me out. I can't believe that after all this time, we haven't gotten better.
And like researching all this and putting all this together, like you go to some dark places.
Yeah.
Do you have a way of like balancing it? Do you watch like cartoons like after
Well,
like?
I have young kids, so you know. So you spend an afternoon watching Octonauts or the new Magic School Bus, and
Gets
that's
you right
it's a good palate cleanser.
All right. I was gonna say. All right, that's good.
Does dealing with supernatural or ghost stuff change your beliefs at all?
Not really. I go into it on the fence most of the time. I don't think it's my job to make a decision and tell people what my decision is. I think my job is to say, like, here's what people said happened. But there's also this side of it too. And what are the questions that come up when we talk about these things? And that's where I love to live, because I think there's a lot of value to be found in just asking the questions, right? What does it say about us that we're obsessed with the afterlife? You know, I don't know what that answer is, but we have to learn something about ourselves from that. Yeah.
So, what other podcasts do you actually listen to?
Not a lot, because I spend most of my time writing, recording, or editing. Hello from the Magic Tavern. Anybody here listen to that? It's 3 guys from an improv comedy group in Chicago that do interview shows at a table in a tavern in a fantasy world, and then broadcast it back to. It's all fiction, but it's all improv. So every time they add something new to the story in an episode, it becomes canon, and they have to work with it. So it's like a little bit of like Whose Line Is It Anyway with Lord of the Rings, and it's very, very fun. 99% Invisible with Roman Mars is a show about the design of everyday objects, things that we take for granted, whether it's the welfare system or the revolving door, like things that you just assume that, well, they've always been that way or whatever. And Roman's a good friend, but his show is absolutely amazing. But yeah, I don't get a lot of listening time, sadly.
That's a very going from one comedy to that.
Again, the palate cleanser question, right? Yeah.
Is there a particular movie or song that you listen to or you watch that people should be listening to or watch right now that they probably don't know about?
If you want to live inside of my soul and what I love, go watch The Village by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yes.
Because it's a horror movie in some weird, loose way, but it's so much more. It's about folklore and community and about doing what you're expected to do versus doing what's right, and it is so beautiful. I love it. So that's like, when we sat down to pitch the TV show to networks, we're talking about the film segments are The Village. Like, that's what I'm trying to get across. Long shots, slow pacing, because we're building emotional stories. Right. So The Village, yeah. When I write, it's usually something instrumental and industrial, like some Trent Reznor soundtracks, things like that. Yeah.
That's all my wheelhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Soundtracks are good for writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how involved were you with like the casting process or any of like the production stuff, or were you kind of just hands off?
Well, this is my first rodeo, so I'm very hands off on casting. I gave input on like directorial picks, things like that. Love their background, love their work, but I left those decisions to the pros. My input came in more in the overall vision casting. Like, here's what it needs to be. Like, come back into the center. Let's stay on this because it needs to be this. I think what any creator would probably do on a TV show. I mean, you ask Robert Kirkman, you know, what's his role in the beginning of a Walking Dead TV show, and it's probably where he was at too. Like, I don't know how to cast people, but I can tell you what the story needs to be about, and that's where I really tried to live is in that place. I'm a storyteller. You know, that's what I do.
All right, let's see if again like get a kick out of this question. Do you think lore is sort of like a real life Amazing Stories?
I mean, in some ways, yeah. Amazing Stories lacked that historical context element to set the stage for the stories, which I always think of like 3D glasses. You know, you're going to go see a 3D movie, they hand you the glasses, and then all of a sudden everything comes to life. That's what the details are for me. That's what the context does. But at the same time, the Amazing Stories were these great fiction pieces. I grew up on those. But even still, like growing up, it was Unsolved Mysteries, the X-Files. Later on, as I got out of high school into college. Yeah.
Have you always been interested in like historically unexplainable events?
Yeah, and all I can trace it back to is 5th grade. Remember the Scholastic Readers Club catalogs? Those newsprint.
Yeah.
There's something in the ink, I think, that makes you want to buy everything in them. And it was in one of them in 5th grade that there was a book of weird and unusual tales. I don't remember the name of the author or the book itself, but it was that book. It was tales that were supposed to be true, but at the same time, what was happening in them couldn't possibly be true. And that just captured me right there. And ever since. And I've never forgotten the first story that I read in there. And so if you ever go see a live show of lore, at least this year, my opening story is that story. I've gone back and I've rediscovered it, I've dug into it, I've rewritten it. And then I use that as like setting the stage for, look at the power of story. Like, not only did it kick off what I've become, but it's just an amazing tale, and it's so fun to share it. And so, yeah. And then after that, all I wanted to do was write freaky stories.
When you were younger, did you read the series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
I hadn't heard of them until about a year ago.
What?
I know, but see, I think they came out after me, maybe. I don't know when they were published.
80s, 90s, late 80s,
Yeah,
early 90s,
yeah.
early 90s.
I grew up, like, I was in high school by the late 80s, so.
You still could have read them. They really weren't meant for children. They really weren't, especially with the artwork. That artwork is actually what terrifies me.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And they redid the book, and they took away some of the artwork, and it's not nearly as impactful.
Right.
Because there's something about being able to see, and that's kind of the thing too, like with lore, because you're listening to it, and I love it's just what you see in your head, but at least with Scary Stories, the things that were in your head were on the paper, and that's what was terrifying. So.
Well, and there's a book coming out next week, the first of 3 lore books, and that was really key in getting an illustrator to bring the visual format of it to life, because that's the background music of a book, right? So when you see the sketch at the top of the story, that sets your mood, sets the tone. That was really important. We found an artist who's amazing, M.S. Corley, who has this Edward Gorey kind of style to his work, black and white, pencil and ink drawings, so beautiful and haunting. So yeah, I hear you on that. I've seen the sketches from those books.
Yeah,
they're terrifying.
You should go read them. I know you're a grown man now, but you should read them and sleep with the light on.
A friend recently sent me one of them because he found out I hadn't heard of him, and he's like, "Are you kidding?" It was actually one of the guys from Hello from the Magic Tavern. He's like, "Are you kidding? You've never seen this?"
Yeah.
He sent me one.
Oh, that's amazing.